Somehow this picture always scares me a little bit. Welcome to Lessons with Dr. Ted. Today, we'll be discussing Plot Part 2, Modern. In my last video, we explored the traditional five-act structure using Romeo and Juliet. Now, one of the reasons I use Romeo and Juliet is because everybody knows the basic story. If I spoil the story for you, you are either too young to be watching these videos or have been raised under a rock. Romeo and Juliet die at the end. Sorry. For this video, we will explore the same five-act structure in terms of a more modern piece. This is also an iconic love story that captured the collective imagination of the world when it was released in 1997 and stands as one of the most popular movies ever. Yes, Titanic. I kind of figured that the iceberg gave that away. If not, well, there you are. I also kind of figured that most people have either seen the movie or are more or less up on the basic story. Even if you haven't and aren't, you will probably have heard of the ship. Spoilers, it sank. A lot of people died. It was very sad. So here we are, Titanic and the five-act structure. A quick recap on what the different acts mean. Act 1 is exposition, setup. Act 2 includes the inciting incident, what gets the story going, and the rising action, where the parameters of the story are established, conflicts and main obstacles discovered and explained. Act 3 covers the events surrounding the main turning point of the story. Freitag calls this the climax. I know, you're thinking, this is a climax. Well, Freitag calls the main turning point the climax, or he did so in German. And this video is not Gustav Freitag explaining Dr. Ted's pyramid of dramatic structure. This video is of me explaining his. In other models, this point is called the crisis. Same thing, just Aristotle and Greek. Act 4 is the falling action. The world of the characters has changed unalterably because of the actions and decisions in Act 3. The characters are trying to keep things together, but the events are kind of taking care of themselves. Act 5, the big ending and the denouement, that is, tying up the loose ends. Back to Titanic and the five-act structure. In the first act of the film, we learn that Rose likes hats. Jack is a risk-taker. Cal is a bit of a jerk. To be fair, we're supposed to hate him because poor Rose is marrying him for financial reasons and all that. However, fans of Downton Abbey don't have any real problems with dynastic marriages. Maybe the title makes the difference. If Cal were the Earl of Grantham, perhaps. Also, to be fair, Rose is a bit obnoxious and superior, what with all her comments about Freud's ideas about the male's preoccupation with size. Her kind might laugh that off. Hallmark Jack might as well, but the rest of the steerage class would probably not have, if they had understood it. It was 1912 after all. Oh, and a fair amount of ship porn. All well and good, but nothing's happened yet. Act 1 is exposition, time and space, some character background, some suggested conflict that will come up in the future. Act 2 follows the start of the story through the establishment of further relationships and conflict and obstacles. The start of the story is called the inciting incident. Since Titanic is supposed to be a love story, a good place to start is when the two meet. Rose, upset at Cal and her lot in life, rushes to the back of the ship, intent on throwing herself overboard. Jack stops her. We will see this same place paralleled much later in Act 5, by the way, so this scene also foreshadows the end to some degree. Act 2 then follows Jack and Rose wandering around the ship getting to know one another. He interacts with her kind. She interacts with his. He plights his troth and she rejects him. The relationship has essentially run its course. They had a flirtation, he goes his way, she goes hers. Something significant has to happen for the next act to start. Act 2, rising action, The inciting incident is Jack and Rose on the back of the ship. If you jump, I jump. They clearly like each other. Jack would certainly like to pursue their relationship. She is made to realize that she has a role to play. Class is an obstacle. So is obligation or duty or what have you. Love is wonderful, but relatively trivial. Anything could still happen. The relationship, that is. The ship is still going to sink. The film is called Titanic, after all, and not Dick and Jane go for an afternoon sailing in the lake. A lot of decisions are made during Act 3. If Act 2 is flirtation, then Act 3 is rebellion. Act 3 begins with Rose taking a risk and trusting Jack over the rules and propriety she has agreed to follow. At almost exactly the halfway point in the movie, Jack and Rose enter the car in the cargo room, and just 2 minutes later we have... Rose has crossed a line. She could no longer simply say this was a flirtation. She might even be able to rationalize the nude sketch, but actually having sex with Jack is a decision a young lady in 1912 could not simply walk away from. Their relationship is different. The way she will face her fiancé and her mother is different, whatever they may say. Another obvious turning point would be a few minutes later when the ship actually strikes the iceberg. That begins a different kind of falling action. However important the iceberg hitting the ship is, it is structurally an unnecessary event. That is, it is not the result of the actions and relationships of the characters. Okay, so perhaps the captain's desire for speed, but this is a love story, not a disaster movie. Cal makes an effort to separate the two young lovers. Jack is arrested. Rose leaves the lifeboat to go and save Jack. This action marks the end of the act. Rose rebels. She casts off Cal and embraces the new man, spiritually and literally. Then she takes on ownership of her own decisions by leaving and ultimately rejecting her family and position. Ironically, the movement of Jack and Rose is literally up for most of the falling action. Act 4 shows us the falling action. The major decisions have been made. Now the characters in the story wrap up the narrative so we can focus Act 5 on the big ending. Act 4 is often, arguably, the weakest part of the narrative. The main decisions have been made in Act 3, and the big ending is in Act 5. When people edit plays or films, they often cut disproportionately from Act 4. In the case of Titanic, Acts 4 and 5 are the visually most interesting because they deal with the sinking of the ship. Still, Act 4 is significantly shorter than Act 1 by 5 minutes. Rose rescues Jack. Rose jumps out of the lifeboat Cal and Jack put her in. Cal gives chase. Jack and Rose run. Yes, there's a lot more to see in this act, but much of it has to do with the ship sinking and little to do with the actual main story. It's pretty neat to watch, though. Rose, with Jack off camera for this shot, has a quiet moment with Mr. Anyus, the ship's builder. This is a brief moment of calm before the storm of Act 5. Showing the results of the decisions, the action tumbles along through Act 4. The characters tend to lose control of the story, not a rule but a tendency. Generally, this is the time to pop by the restroom or to get some more popcorn. Act 5 surrounds the big ending, what most of us would call the climax. Freitag calls this the catastrophe. That is followed by the denouement, the tying up of loose ends. There's a fair amount of stoicness. Jack and Rose go to the stern of the ship. This was foreshadowed in Act 2. The ship sinks. Rose gets on the door, and yes, the door was big enough. Jack dies. Denouement. Rose avoids any chance of meeting Cal and her mother. Older Rose throws away the financial security for her family for generations. Rose meets the love of her life, clearly rejecting any husband or husbands she may have had in her adult years for a backseat quickie she had at 17. Titanic is structured almost perfectly. Act 1 is 37 minutes long, Act 2, 40, Act 3, 39, Act 4, 32, Act 5, 39, equaling 187 minutes. When analyzing a movie or play, or to a lesser degree a book, I'll do a video where I discuss that later. Look at the numbers. If you want to know where the most important turning point is, take a video and look at the middle of the film. Ignore the closing credits, which can skew the numbers. If we do not ignore the closing credits, then the turning point of the movie is the sighting of the iceberg. Not even the hitting, but the sighting. If you enjoyed my video, please like and subscribe, and check out my other videos, my web pages, and my Amazon page. Thank you.